Welcome to the College Knowledge Podcast, sponsored by the College Planning Network and Paradigm Financial Group. Whether you're searching for that right fit college, applying to college, or figuring out how you're going to afford it all, you're in the right place. You'll hear from deans, admissions counselors, student athletes, and scholars from esteemed universities and colleges around the country. We'll dig deep to uncover their insight and unique experiences. So whether you're a student gearing up for college or a parent with college-bound kids, sit back, relax, and listen. Like you, we have lots of questions. Our guests have the answers, and we're excited to share them with you. Let's get started. We can send your student to the school of their dreams and send you to your dream retirement. Visit us at elitecollegiateplanning.com to get started. All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to College Knowledge. I'm your host, Dave Kozak. Unfortunately, my co-host, Mr. Joe Kerins, is not going to be able to join us today, but we do have the distinguished pleasure of interviewing Elizabeth West. Elizabeth is the CEO of EWC Consulting and has 25 years of experience in higher education and is now doing some pretty awesome work. So, Elizabeth, first of all, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
So obviously we share a passion for higher ed and trying to help families navigate and make strategic choices. Why don't you walk us through a little bit how you got to where you are and what you're doing now to help families?
Great. Thank you. So early in my career, I was in admissions, and I was in admissions for 10 years. And So I started as an admissions counselor, road runner, if you will, going up and down the roads. And then I progressed to associate director of admissions at UNC Charlotte and director of admissions at Carolinas College of Health Sciences, which was predominantly a nursing program.
Okay.
And then I had kiddos and I really didn't want to travel that much. So I pivoted and I taught at our local community college full-time English. And I taught there for 15 years. Okay.
So you've been in higher ed basically
the whole time. Yes.
And, you know, we talk and in the past 100 shows that we've done, it's been a very interesting time to kind of peel back the layers of the onion on higher ed because of the pace of change. From your start to now, how much has all this changed?
Oh my goodness. You know, I think that the most major change that I've seen so I have two different sides of that question. So the first side is the admission side. Mm-hmm. And absolutely, I've seen the change of prestige, that the prestige kind of pressure to get into these top schools has been, you know, an astronomical change. So when you look at these small regional schools, which is what I started out as and what I went to for undergraduate, suffering now because their enrollments are lower and maybe even reduced by half. So, I mean, that's a huge shift from staying closer to home to trying for these high brand schools.
We'll come back to the pedigree in this conversation, but
exactly. But I think academically, you can't discount online learning. And, you know, 25 years ago, forget it. That was not happening. So,
agreed. Yeah. So, and you had made mention on the admission side, there's one piece. What's the other side that has changed dramatically?
So the academically online learning.
Got it. So the academic side of it. Understand. Yeah. And talk about the last 3 years. That's been perpetuated almost to an insane level. So like we made progress in online learning from 2000 to 2018. Right. And then we made progress in online learning. And, you know, I always talk about COVID is eventually it's going to be looked back as one of the biggest blunders and failed experiments of our time. But the reality is we did what we had to do and everybody did what they thought was right. And unfortunately, it has now really pushed the importance of online classroom or online or of in-person learning to the side. And I think that's a tragic failure because especially in higher ed, right? If you're online, there's only so much that can be done effectively online. Think about the sciences, think about the engineering, think about the lab work. I mean, my freshman year psychology class, right? We're in a lab for 4 hours twice a week.
Right.
You can't do that online. Right.
Absolutely.
And so to think that we're going to completely replace in classroom with online, I just think is not it's not a good outcome, because when you get to practice in life and you're actually practicing in what you learn or what your degree is, you don't get to do it online. Right. Yeah. Now, there are some jobs that are remote, but the majority of jobs that require any type of lab, you're going to be in that environment. So. Right.
Well, I think online learning takes a lot of work. I taught online for 10 years, and I can tell you the different teaching style that I applied to online was time intensive, was research. I mean, I had to be a different teacher online than I did in my in-person classes. The students had to have a different skill set. And so there's no vetting, there's no vetting for faculty, and there's no vetting for students to be successful in an online environment. And I agree, you absolutely can't replace, especially when, the top necessity in life these days is soft skills. You can't replace that in an online environment.
You can't learn them in an online. It's a self-study. And it's interesting too, because at the time, so I had an interesting kind of environment. I was managing the companies that I own, and I decided I was going to get my CFP, which is the Certified Financial Planner, which is kind of the gold standard in financial planning. And I didn't need it. I still don't need it, but I was like, I'm going to get this credential so no one can ever say, hey, you don't have a CFP. At that time, I was also negotiating to acquire another company. And so I had a full docket, and I was like, all right, I'm going to do this thing online. I can tell you firsthand, I don't learn well online. You listen to a lecture and then go do this exercise or read this book, and it doesn't work for me. And so I spent a lot of money to enroll at Boston University's CFP program, and the business acquisition took 90% of my time. And so it's not that I couldn't have done it, but it would have been a very difficult lift for me to do online. Now, I think that's also a combination of discipline and motivation, right? So we always say that discipline is when you're unmotivated, discipline is what carries you, right? Yeah.
Yes.
Motivation comes and goes, but discipline needs to remain constant. And so part of going to a class, or me having to travel somewhere to sit in that class and make that effort, there's a discipline to that I wasn't going to get when I have 4 kids at home, 5 businesses I'm managing, and an acquisition, right? So it was the timing wasn't perfect, but the end result was, even at the onset, I wasn't negotiating for a business, and I did have the time and I had the schedule, and it was still very hard to achieve. So, and I think your point that I never even thought about, that everybody should hear, is there are teachers and professors that are very good at that. And then there are those that are not. And unfortunately, you're right. There's no vetting for, hey, you're credentialed, so you can do this. And I think it's not the case.
Right. Absolutely. And I enjoyed it. I mean, the other part of it is, you go into teaching with a passion for helping students. And when you do in person, there's an electricity, there's something alive with that. But when you are in an online environment, you kind of have to create that, and you have to create opportunities for them to interact with you. And that's time intensive. For an online instructor, a lot of them don't offer online office hours. You don't offer these things that I can get to know my students through an online environment.
Yeah. And it makes here's the other thing that I think is, the subject matter that you're studying is often difficult, right? So you're already faced with a challenge to master the subject matter.
Right.
But then to lose that interpersonal connection with your classmates, with your group study, with all of that, like that's just a tough environment to be in. Now I'm not saying it's not, some people, that's their world. They learn better that way. Right. And it's interesting because in our admissions process, we use for most of our students, we do the strong interest inventory. And one of the points at the end of that is they tell you, it looks like you typically prefer learning by lecture or learning by books and reading or doing. And for a subset of people where they learn better in that environment, I'm sure it's a very effective way, but you still cannot replace the labs and the soft skills that are required to communicate in the professional environment, right?
No, absolutely. And there's also a piece to that as well, that some learners don't really care who's teaching them. They don't need that personal connection. They'll succeed regardless of who's teaching, if the teaching is good. I get that too. But there are a high number of students that really need to have a personal relationship with that teacher, that they want to know the instructor. They want to, they want to rely on that person. And so I think that the low teacher motivation, those kids that can do learning regardless of the person that's teaching, I think that maybe that might be an aspect of online learning that could be really interesting. If they're really competent in that particular area and they don't really need that much personal interaction, but nobody's assessing this. And so then you get these students that want a ton of attention that would be more appropriate in an in-person class, and you have them in an online environment, and it's just a recipe for failure.
Yeah. There's another piece of this, which is interesting too, because in all the conversations we've had for people that have gotten to a high level in higher ed or even in business, there's always a mentor that is involved in that success. And I think in the online environment, it's hard to find that mentor. It's more difficult. Now, I'm not saying it can't be done, but I think it's also easier for people where mentorship is something that is, typically you become a mentor of someone because their thirst for knowledge inspires you to inspire them, and it's a reciprocal relationship. Well, if I'm a professor and I'm teaching online and I don't have office hours and it's easier to not get that relationship that would encourage you to be that mentor. I'm still shocked that my kids I have 4 kids under 11 and they all had to learn online for a year and a half, trying to learn how to read online. Like, it just is and that's at the elementary school level, but it was every level of education that went that way. Ill-prepared, foundational skills that are just kind of up in the air at this point, and we don't even know the true impact. We can't see it yet. It's going to be 5-10 years or more that we are able to really see what happened. And what I think is kind of a blind spot, or maybe it's tone deafness, I'm not sure which, but when admissions offices are looking at students and they are totally discounting the COVID situation, like you have to have just gotten through that miraculously with a 4.5 GPA. And that's where I have conversations with people who are in admissions and say, but you're talking out of both sides of your mouth. You're talking about how important mental health is. And then you talk about, but you need to disregard all of that because you need to succeed. And it can't be both. Nope, it cannot. And let's also, there's many studies that have been done about like what leads to success. And it all comes down to grit at some point, right? And coping and how you deal with struggle and pain and consequence and all that stuff. And so COVID was real. The infractions and the requirements on people were severe. But the reality is those challenges are faced in life. You don't ignore that you came through a challenge. You embrace the fact that you came through the challenge, and you use that as a stepping stone to, hey, if we got through that, what can we get through next? And I agree. Just dismissing it is a shame. Go ahead.
We needed to use that. You grow through hard times. And what I've seen, especially in K through 12, is that wasn't used. That information, those real pain points and what we learned has not been used to its full utilization. We have just kind of gone back to where we were and hope everything's okay. Yeah. And the thing is, the innovation was the piece that we really needed at that point.
Agreed. And I think there's a very real, and I've seen it in the professional environment, a very real result of this that I would call it a consequence, is that it is now assumed that it's okay to just be online or just get on the Zoom call or just don't even make the effort. It doesn't matter. Nobody cares about the effort, right? And we haven't seen how this group of graduates that went through 3 years of education that was just completely messed up, how they're going to work in the professional world when they have to be around and in, and the requirement. Businesses are going to snap back. And they're going to force people in the office. I'm telling you right now, because one of the key soft skills that happens in the work environment is you're around colleagues. You learn as much in between the lines as you do in the formalized meetings and the Zoom calls and the all of that. And the next identified person for a promotion, who is it? Yeah. You don't know now. There's no next in line. There's nobody that you can't see the going above and beyond and trying to engage and learning from the manager on the side conversations about how they dealt with the situation. That just doesn't exist. And so you're going to see this stagnation of upward mobility, and that stagnation is a death sentence to economic development because, right, if your older generations aren't retiring because there's no one to replace them, it's a trickle down effect to the graduates that you're not hiring because we have these people in place and people are satisfied with it. Yeah. So that will be very interesting to see. You made a comment and it brought a thought to me. I'll have to snap back to it in a minute, but so in your experience, right? What are the focus points of, and again, I always try and come back to the high school students that are typically the parents of the high school students that are listening here. You made a mention of pedigree and the rank and all of that. And it's an absolutely tragic environment that we're living in with college ranking systems and all of that, because I just had a conversation with a client yesterday. Daughter wants to go to a certain school. It's ranked 83rd in the country in this major. Doesn't want to go to another school that's going to be less expensive, that's ranked 7 in this major. And I wanted to be like, forget all of that, right? It comes down to the person. It comes down to the person and what they're going to get out of their education. Right. You can't justify to me, and I've said it 1,000 times, and I'm going to say it again. If you could prove to me the difference between the number 1 rated school and the top 100, try it. Yeah. Because I will tell you every day that is a blatant lie. The number 1 ranked school in the country, I don't care what it is not right for every kid. Right. Period.
Absolutely.
That is it. And it comes down to social fit, academic fit, and financial fit.
Yes, absolutely. That's what I say all the time.
That's it. It's the deal.
That's it.
But when you have, again, you talk about what's publicized, who's got the reach, who can get the message out there. When the U.S. News and World Report puts its rankings out and people are just like, well, I got to go to this school. Yeah. You lose sight of the entirety of what you're trying to do, right?
Right. Well, and the credibility of the rankings themselves. I mean, when you look at the foundation information, when you look at their endowments, when you're looking at that is a piece of their ranking, then you have to call that all into question. That has nothing to do with undergraduate education. And Correct. It has everything to do with money, which we know talks. So absolutely, that's the piece of that. I hate rankings. I could go into like a million reasons why.
No, as can I.
But, I'm all about college fit. You're all about college fit. And,
100%.
I think that there's nothing that replaces that feeling that a student gets on campus. And I had that feeling,
Yep,
and
as
it's
did
an
I.
intangible. It's one of those things where you say it to parents and they're like, oh God. But seriously, like if a student says they have a bad feeling on campus, it was their number one choice, and they got a bad feeling, then we have some serious conversations around, you have to be happy at that institution, because it is a 4-year investment, not only financially, but in your emotional self. What are you giving to that campus? And so, yeah, absolutely. This whole, and you can give a number of examples of these smaller regional schools that are killing it in fields of engineering and business. You know, there's a combined engineering and business program in a small school in upstate New York that is one of 3 schools in the nation that have that accreditation. And so I say that to students. I'm like, really? You know, you're going to go to this school because...
Is that Clarkson?
Yes, it's Clarkson University. Yes. Yay. I didn't know if I should mention it or not, but I love Clarkson. Sure. Clarkson is amazing.
It's been a great engineering school for 50, 70 years. I mean, and to know that they do the business thing. And I want to add to that because I have clients that are engineers.
Yeah.
And then I have clients that are on the business side of engineering, that sell it, that manage it, that do it. And the difference in income between an engineer and someone that can speak it, talk it, sell it is $300,000.
And that's what we're talking about from Clarkson University. You know, and I get students all the time. I'm located out of North Carolina, and I'm like, you would be well worth your time and money to go to Clarkson University. You've never heard of it, but you're going to. And you're going, and there may be a regret later if you don't go to this wonderful program. And
they end up at Clemson. No offense to Clemson, but it's big ticket engineering school, right? Or Georgia Tech or Virginia Tech, and they become one of the machine.
Yes.
And it's crime. So I went to a small liberal arts college in Lancaster, Pennsylvania called Franklin and Marshall.
Yeah.
And my education was, I mean, top notch.
Yeah.
They taught me how to think. They didn't tell me what to think. They laid out the groundwork for growth, the mindset of like, hey, if you don't get it now, you can get it later. It'll come. Like, and the other thing that I think was very important is they said, you need to understand all this stuff, but you need to realize that the moment you leave here is when you start your learning, right? Whatever that job is when you start to learn how it works. And so, you know, again, I support and I did business economics with a minor in psychology. Mm-hmm. And so it has paid dividends. And it's interesting too, because you're seeing a lot more of these combined major things pop up, but they're not at the big schools. No. They're not coming down from the Penn States, Ohio States, Michigans. They're coming from the small schools that have right. It's very hard to change a large institution.
Absolutely.
It's a lot less resistance to change a small institution and revolutionize it. One of them that comes to mind is Drexel.
Yes. Oh gosh, yes.
Drexel has just rewritten the script on what education should be.
Oh, it's exciting to see. You know, their co-op program is just top notch. Amazing. Well, and
even Elon is another one that has rewritten how they do their study abroads and the way and I mean, you can go down the list, Babson, and like there are tons of schools that have revolutionized education for all the right reasons. Yeah. And then there's the good old fashioned. And now this is not to say, and I don't want people to think that I'm biased towards schools, right? There's a fit for everybody. Right. What we're really saying is stop paying attention to the ranks, right? Yes. It just doesn't. If you're in it for the rank, you're in it for the wrong reason. The reason for education and the reason to attend college is so that you can launch and have the best career path that you can have for you. Absolutely. I have met successful people that have graduated with every degree under the sun. There is no measure of success because, well, you're going to be, you're an art history major. Okay. A colleague or not a colleague, but a classmate of mine manages the MoMA, right? So there's a pinnacle in every career. It doesn't have to be. And then The other thing that I think is vitally important is the entrepreneurial kind of thought. Like, I'm not saying everybody go to school for entrepreneurship. That's not what I'm saying. But knowing that if you're passionate about something, there's a business you can create. The end. I don't care if you're passionate about dance or baseball or geometry. There's a business.
Hey guys, don't forget, send anyone our way who needs help with college or who is sending a student to college. College planning the right way requires an expert. Book a free consultation at elitecollegiateplanning.com.
Yes. Oh my gosh. And I'm so glad you said that, because my background, there was no way I even considered starting a business. It's like, why would you do that? And then I just kept hearing people saying the wrong things about admissions. And I was like, I could do like a side hustle and help people. And it grew exponentially. And now I'm running a business and I'm learning how to run this business because my undergraduate degree was in English and political science. My graduate degree is in teaching English as a second language. I have to get up to speed with entrepreneurship, and entrepreneurship does not have to be, well, you have to own this multi-million-dollar company. Small business is what's moving this 100%. Economy. And I'm so grateful, that what should be at the end of my career is starting this new, absolutely wonderful career. And I'm learning a lot, and it keeps me young.
Well, and I think that the other point that you said more eloquently than I will is you're still learning, and you're continuing to learn, and you're getting better, and you're sharpening the axe every single day. And so one of the biggest issues I see in general is you come out of college and you think you know everything, and you get into a job and you're the best at that particular job, and you plateau and you stay there, right? That to me is like the toxic environment of life. The learning should happen constantly. The growth mindset, the mentality of getting better at whatever it is you want to get better at, pick something. And you made mention earlier too about the growth happens outside the comfort zone. So you got to push. Right. And that's that, you went through the entrepreneurial seizure, we call it, from E-Myth. And it's like, hey, I can do this. And you know what? I'm going to start it on the side, and it develops, and you learn along the way, both the business side, and you're keeping pace with the admission side too, which is incredibly important.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's just so important that we don't stagnate. I mean, as people, as professionals, and that you keep pushing and keep passionate. I feel like I have even more passion for students than I did when I started 25 years ago. I feel like that's just grown, but it's with how much I've learned. And so I say to my friends who have succeeded in various areas of business and education, and we always look back and we say, this is better than we even expected. That we couldn't even had anticipated what our path would have been. So I always keep that in mind when I'm advising students that, you might like to do this, but you can't imagine what's out there for you.
Nope. And that part of the journey that you go on through education is like, you could go down one path, and this is where it's going to be. And you end up in a completely different place because opportunity presents itself. You create opportunity, you get recruited, you do some networking, someone recruits you, and all of a sudden you were curating museum, and now you're a top salesperson in IBM. Like, why? Because they saw the soft skills, they saw the development of things that you could do, they saw the attention to detail, whatever it is, right? You just don't know when those opportunities come. So I wanted to reflect back. I remember what I was talking about, but I have been studying the business of higher education for the last 5 years, and I am shocked at the business end of this thing. And you made mention of the endowments and the way they're ranked based on the amount of money that they have and the ability to give, and it starts to get really crazy when you look at how COVID was dealt with in higher ed from a admission standpoint, because all of the old mentality was gone instantaneously. They didn't have the standard ranking mechanisms. We've been through a softening in society of like everybody's equal. So you don't get class ranks anymore and you don't get right. And so all of a sudden, all the metrics that used to be the ones that led to the acceptance at the elite schools are gone. And what I have been studying in my own business and then learning from the admissions directors of admissions that we've talked to is the algorithms that they're using to determine, and really it comes down to yield, which is insane because now it sounds like we're talking about like literally money, right? Financial yields, they're talking about yield of student. And so the goal for a college is to admit as few people as possible to fill their enrollment, thereby shrinking their acceptance rates, thereby getting their rankings in the books higher.
Yeah.
And when COVID hit and they killed the SAT and then they decided, hey, we're going to do test optional or you can't even take it. They had to reinvent their admissions processes. And there was back when I was going to school, there was the demonstrated interest was a thing, right?
Oh yeah.
And all these schools have been saying, no, demonstrated interest is not, we don't really pay attention to that anymore. We don't pay attention to it. Well, they're all paying attention to it now. And they're paying attention to it in clicks, in bait, in like they're doing the same thing businesses do. So if you want to put yourself in a good position and a school invites you to listen in, to be a part, to join a group, to do a thing, do the thing. Be a part of it because they're watching, and their goal is to and to circle back on the algorithm. Basically, they have created a list of criteria that generate a predictable outcome. So if you click here and you visit at this point and you do this and you join this Facebook group and you do all of those things, you have a 92%. You're 92% likely to attend if accepted.
Right.
That's what they want.
Right. Well, and absolutely. And I would go one step further and I tell my students, demonstrated interest, even if they say they don't look at it, they do look at it. Absolutely. Especially when students are deferred, they are really testing you if you are interested. They want new information and all of that, but
correct.
You have to then ratchet that up into I'm demonstrated interest, and it's not your parents calling. It's
Never.
you. It's you. So attend those webinars, ask the questions, get your name out there to an admissions person. Yep. And I got to tell you, admissions people are just people, right? They are just people that want to, that are human. And so I would remember names. I worked at a school of 25,000 students. I remembered names of people that made the attempt to reach out to me. And I think that's so important.
Yeah. You add that humanality to it and all of a sudden you're no longer a number. Right. You're a name and there's someone on the inside pulling for you. As opposed to the alternative, which is dismiss. Oh, I remember that person. They reached out like 7 times. Let's give that a better review. Let's take a second look at that one.
Right. And that's impactful in the committees. When you're in a committee and you're going to bat for that student. And yes, they may not have all of the credentials that this student has, but they're dying to come here. They're dying to be one of our students. And so, you cannot discredit that.
Well, and what a lot of people don't understand, and I've spent my career on the financial side of college, helping families plan and figure out how to win at the college game, for lack of a better expression, is if you are a borderline student at that school, you don't really fit the metric, but you do all the right things, and that school is the absolute best financial fit for that family, right? That's a win.
Yes.
But you also don't realize that if you think schools don't know where you applied and how many schools you applied to and all, like, you're wrong. The grapevine in the higher ed is the grapevine in the higher ed. They know.
Oh, yes.
And they compete and they 100% compete.
Oh my gosh. Absolutely.
No school wants to lose to its competitor in student attraction. Right?
No,
that's
absolutely
reality.
Not.
And so the more you dig into that business side of it, you realize, okay, you're playing the game of life. You're in this, and take a strategy and get after it. Right. So let's shift gears for a minute, because I could talk about this stuff all day.
Me too. I could too.
I want to bring in some of the things that the high school students need to understand, and the parents of the high school students need to understand to put themselves in a great position to get into the schools they want to. First of all, do you have a recommendation on how many schools you tell people to apply to?
I say 8 to 10.
Perfect. I was hoping you would say that. I go 6 to 8, and then I'm really 8 to 12. Like, cast a wide net, because the wider the net and the more variation you have in the type of institution, the better you're probably going to fare in the game overall.
Absolutely.
What kind of experiences or disciplines do high school students need to take, and how do you coach them to approach this? Right. I know a lot of people, they kick the can down the road. They don't take active approaches. I'm encouraging people at freshman year to start thinking about it. Like, hey, I don't want you to pick the choice. I don't want you to pick the major of the school, but I want you to pay attention to your likes and dislikes as you go through your education so that you're on a right path.
We have a lot of discussions about strengths and preferences, and we have a lot of discussions surrounding what are your natural talents and what are those things that may be a little bit harder for you to grasp. And how do those natural talents, things that you love and that light you up, how do they blend into an academic major or even just a pathway? Because I find that most of my job is making sure that I'm not making the student even more anxious. I'm trying to
100%.
Yeah. I'm trying to give them so many options. So, I like to look at skills. I like to look at what lights them up, what's exciting for them. But you have to, and I do, because I guess I'm a parent, and I do talk about the U.S. Department of Labor outlooks for each of these programs or whatever ultimate careers they want to go into. I'm like, we have to keep in mind, you need to put a roof over your head. Okay. Yep. So here's the situation with that choice, and here's the situation with this choice. And I'm just putting it out there. It doesn't mean that that's absolutely going to be the case. But if you don't have some kind of metrics, I feel like I'm not advising them wholeheartedly.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think unfortunately, we're also the competition that exists at the ranking levels. I think there's also I've met I would say 25% of the students that I've worked with have put the pressure on themselves.
Yes.
Right. 75% of the students, the parents or the school has put the pressure on the student, and for all the wrong reasons. And, we're crazy on AP courses. We're crazy on this next level, get ahead of the game, try and, and it kind of correlates to every part of life, right? Your travel sports are starting earlier, and, you're seeing a just intensity that comes in, and we're taking a immature mind, right? The human brain's not fully developed until 27, 28, 30 years old. And we're having them make really huge life choices in that. And we're not giving them the hard skills or soft skills to kind of sort those decisions out. And I think there's an influence that comes from the parents that is, you got to be an engineer, you got to be a doctor, you got to be a lawyer to be successful. And I hate it. I was even subject of it, because there was never a push for me to be a lawyer, but my dad was a lawyer, and it was a natural progression. And it was something where, like, okay, when I got done college, and F&M was a pain in the butt. I spent a lot of hours in the library to get out of that school. I was done, and I wanted to test my mettle. I wanted to see what I could make of it. And I've done very well as a result, but there are these preconceived pathways that I think are tragic to the student, because you don't let them find the passion. And I can't tell you how many people have gone to law school and call themselves recovering attorneys, or how many people have gone to engineering school and say, I'm not practicing. Like, what?
And what are we doing to you as a person? Yeah. I mean, we're stifling that aspect of you that could be so much more, but you have to fit into this particular economic framework that we think is the right thing for you because we're your parents. And, there are, and you've read all of the articles that have said there are careers that we can't even dream of that are going to be a reality for these students. And so, not preparing the students for a specific career, but what are your talents? What are your skills that can be applied to these careers that we don't even know about yet?
Yep.
And so, writing is still important. Communication is still important, but you also need technical skills. And, then we add all of these things in and discredit the arts, discredit a creative mind, when creativity is in engineering, is in law, it's everywhere. And so I think that really educating that whole student is so important.
Yep. Well, and there have been so many studies done on playtime as a young child and free time, and just make believe time that leads to that development of the creative side of the brain, which is lost now because everything is scheduled and play dates are scheduled. Nobody goes outside and just goes to the yard and plays anymore, and finds a stick and plays cops and robbers or whatever the game is, right? It's just that and you stifle that creativity, and it follows through every step of the way. So great, all the math. That's amazing. Can you apply it to a situation that changes the world, or are you just you can just wash, rinse, and repeat and build steel girders for bridges? And we need those people, right?
Right.
But for the majority of architectural engineers, right, creativity is a big deal,
Right. Well, and to your point about mentorship, can you disseminate that information and share it so that the next generation is just as magnificent as you are and as successful or even more in sharing that expertise? I think that requires a lot of social skills and really generosity.
And again, we go right back to if you're not in a workplace that has that, because you're all remote in different places and never get together, does that camaraderie and does that growth exist? Let's flip to technology for a second, because we mentioned it's changed higher education, but there are some real new things that are not good. Cheating is accessible. Artificial intelligence writing essays. You're talking about just a wild amount of you don't even have to do it now. You can have a computer pass your exam, take your test, give you the answers. That's wild. What do you see happening in the higher ed as it pertains to technology, and how has it changed it?
I have a lot of dear friends that are English professors. And so they're having multiple conversations about ChatGPT and GPT and all of these other advents of AI. And I even tested it with my husband. And I've got to tell you, it's scary. We tested it just like a personal letter. And then we tested it for a college essay. And the specificity and the kind of structure that I usually teach is there, and it's frightening. So, so that's the fear aspect of how are we going to manage this? And it's going to mean more cheating and more, but there's also a part of AI that's very exciting for those special needs students. When you talk about students that cannot speak or cannot see, or you have students that are autistic, and you look at those benefits of an AI, that makes me excited.
Yeah.
I think that we don't need to let our fear guide the way and just, dismiss it. It's evil or whatever. You have to, I'm not necessarily embrace it, but I'm saying you have to know it's there, it's real, and research it. And we need to get our arms around what this actually is and the implications of it.
Yeah. And my outlook was, well, I have an easy solution. You take the exams and the essays and you have to go into a computer lab like we used to, and you have to do it there.
Yeah.
Right? How do you control it otherwise, right? If you're taking a remote examination and you get a code and you send that code to a roommate or to someone you paid $100 to take the exam for you, right? Well, okay, you got to show up and do it in a different way. And I think, it's the same with social media. I think it's the worst ever, but it has its positives too, right? Family loses a family member and everybody gets to know about it and support that family. Like there's a great result in that regard, but there's also the mental health side where some kids getting picked on because they posted a picture they shouldn't have, or you're sitting in your office and you're scrolling through and everybody's putting their highlight reel of their vacations up and you feel terrible because you didn't take that vacation, or so with each progression of technology, there's the positive and the negative to it, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
I just hope the positive outweighs the negative.
Me too. That's what I'm hoping.
I shouldn't say I'm not. Everybody's a tech person anymore, right? But you have to have some acclimation to technology to be able to move around anymore. For a student in the application process, what do you focus on the most as they're kind of, as they're doing their applications, as they're writing their essays? How are you guiding them to the end result that is, success?
Yeah. I think that you have to be really realistic about how admissions offices make decisions. And I have the ability to know that because I did it. So, when we look at the student's academic profile, I'm always looking at GPA and I'm looking at SAT and I'm managing expectations, because really you have to be realistic about how much does the essay mean. And that's not quantifiable sometimes, because if there is an essay, there were several essays that I read in admissions that moved me. And did it move me enough to go to bat for that student? Heck yeah, absolutely. So, at what percentage did that essay mean to that student? And so that's the subjective part that you don't really get to see. But there are people out there in admissions committees saying, this is an amazing kid. And so I really I want students to take it from an academic perspective, but from a humanity perspective, make those connections, those personal connections. Will they outweigh a 2.5 GPA? Absolutely not. But can they help you create those kind of relationships where these people know you? Yes, absolutely. And the hidden secret, or maybe it's not so hidden, is that admissions officers at these schools are the biggest cheerleaders for their institutions. And so if you love that school as much as they do, they're going to connect with you on a different level than other people that just come in and say, I want to get in here because of the name or whatever. Well, you don't really love it. And so I try to handle the academic aspects, but there are those intangibles that I really try to talk about those in perspective.
Yeah, we had an essay, or we had an acceptance letter come back this year, and this student had written the essay, sent it to me. I put my 2 cents in restructuring some sentences so it wasn't past tense, and just very minimal stuff. And because it was a well done essay, it really laid out goals and objectives and why she wanted to be where she was going. And letter came back in the bottom right hand corner was a handwritten note, like, thanks for sharing your plans in your essay. It meant everything to us, with a little smiley face and a thank you. And they awarded her $148,000 scholarship over 4 years. Yes. Boom, the end. Right?
I love that. That's absolutely true. And that is that is also a story that correlates with, don't let your parents write the essay. And if you contract with someone like us in this profession that are saying that they'll write your essay, it's completely obvious to an admissions officer.
100%.
Oh my gosh. The number, I had thousands of applications to read, and they would go by the wayside because I was like, there's no heart in this. There's no voice in this. And this wasn't written by the student.
It's grammatically perfect. It's structured per the textbook. It is like, and it's all lip service. And you can, when someone gives you lip service verbally, you can tell. When they do it on paper, you can tell twice as easy. Right?
It's offensive.
It is.
It's offensive to admissions professionals. So yeah, absolutely. You know,
and I think that the funny thing too is that parents and students feel that that you would expect an essay from a 17-year-old to be written by a 40-year veteran writing professional. Like that, they don't even, it's not even close.
No.
Right? It's not even close. We always talk about, in the first thing in the essay to do is grab them something, grab a passion, grab something and lay it out right off the bat. Like,
yes.
Whatever it is. And we've done a bunch of essay classes and worked with, and one of the gentlemen that has run that class, his whole kind of opinion was, don't write what you think they want to hear, write what you want to tell. Right?
Oh, yes.
Right. If you're passionate about bikes or mountain biking or the human anatomy or weightlifting or Cheerios, like write about it, because it comes through, and that's what they want to see. They want to see inside.
Right. And when you're so excited about it, you're getting that other person excited. I had a student write about a tour of barbershops that he took. And that was his college essay, and how it was, he got to know people, he got to know socioeconomic levels. And I mean, it was just brilliant. But could I have ever said to him, why don't you write about barbershops? No, they have to drive that based on their passions. Yeah. And then what our job is to say, okay, let's focus that a little bit, because there are certain prompts that we have to meet. You can't just break
what
crazy.
Are we saying? Right.
Yeah.
We're not just telling a story. There's got to be an intro that says, this is what I'm going to do. And at the end you say, and that's why I do this. Right.
Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, I remember one of the craziest essays I ever wrote was, it started off, I remember the first time I held a human brain. Okay. I'm what, why? And yes, let me read on,
Yes.
And not that I'm into holding human brains, but kid wanted to be a pathologist.
Oh man.
Like, how do you can't, I mean, that's gold. Right. And another one was, it started and it said, it was something like, I remember the first time I laid eyes on the Trek, and it went on some bike, and the whole essay was how that seeing that bike motivated his thing for downhill mountain biking. And like, you could just, I mean, it was, you can't write that unless you feel that.
Right. And I love what you're saying about this too, is that it doesn't have to be so on the nose academic either. I mean, come on. The Common App essay, which is what they write, is supposed to be general, and it's supposed to humanize your application. And so if you're writing about your passion for, we have to really have a passion for this academic area, if that's what we're going to talk about. But if you don't have a true passion for it, write about what you do. Write about fixing cars, write about, whatever it is. And that's going to make for a killer essay.
Correct. But correlate it, don't
exactly.
just, hey,
everything's
I love
learning.
Working on cars. This motors are awesome. Like, no, it's like, okay, why? And the discipline to get that car finished, or to bring it to the finish line, like tie in the things that show completion or show the progression or evolution of what you've done.
Absolutely.
From a admissions officer standpoint, what weighs the most for you, right? When you were going through this and you were actually looking at an application, right? You've got all the statistics, all the data, you've got the essay, you've got the scores, and you're putting this together. What did you focus on to make a decision?
I would absolutely look at the academic profile, because it wasn't that I was trying to find a way to keep people out. It was, I wanted to make sure that you could handle the rigor, handle and be successful. And so, lots of algorithms that we applied would be a predicted grade index of you're going to get, what kind of GPA are you going to get as a freshman at this college. So that was like the first level. But then I am an emotional learner, and I am a very emotional person. So I always wanted to look at, who am I inviting to our community? Mm-hmm. What did you do? What clubs and organizations? Getting a little selfish here, but what are you going to provide for our campus culture? And that meant a lot to me, because I wanted to see active and engaged students, and that could handle the academic work. But then the essay, that's the writer in me. I was just always innately curious about who are you? Who are you as a person?
Well, I think that's a great point. If I may extrapolate there.
Yeah.
You have an opportunity in your college application only once to tell who you are.
Yes.
Only one time. Everything else is the numbers on a paper, I joined the robotics club and I did this and I was a varsity athlete. All good things, not taking anything away from that. But the only time you get to tell the person on the other end of that who you are is in that written document. And it's not always going to be a deal breaker, and it's not always going to be the deal maker, but it is the only opportunity you get. Because everything else is just a stat. It's just what I did. This is the only time to say what I want to do, or who I am, or where I want to go, or what I want to be. So I always tell people, in your essay, it's as close as you're going to get to sitting across the table from that person and telling them something. And so make it something you care about. Before we end, and I could do this for hours, but
me too.
Did you ever do student interviews when you were in admissions? Were you ever at a school that did interviews?
Oh, well, absolutely. I wasn't at a school that did interviews for admission, but I would do them for scholarships.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that I've said more now than ever is, like, if you get an opportunity to sit with somebody, take the opportunity to go sit with that person. Go talk to them. Like, again, I can't say that it'll be a deal breaker, but it certainly is a deal maker. I'm pretty confident the only reason I got into Franklin and Marshall was because I did an interview and we talked about ancient Greek mythology, which by chance I happened to sit with a person that was obsessed with ancient Greek mythology, and she couldn't believe that we got as deep as we did into it. And we talked for 45 minutes on that subject alone. And the next week I got an admissions letter. So I'm not going to say it was the only thing, but that one sealed the deal for sure.
Well, admissions people are friendly for the most part. They should be, or in the wrong business. So they're friendly. They like to talk. They like to know people. And for the most part, they want to help. And so if I students would come in all the time and visit. And what I would try to do is, if you were a good fit, then I would engage you in more conversation. If I felt like within the scope of our conversation, you may not be a good fit, but you would be maybe a good transfer fit, then I would talk about, so is a wonderful opportunity to personalize yourself, but it's also another possibility of reconnoitering yourself and basically saying, okay, I might not be able to get in here as a freshman, but this is my goal for transferring and finding that pathway. So I just loved talking to the students. I mean, I loved being in the position I was in. So I absolutely agree. Do not take that for granted. It is a human experience. Yeah.
And I think that's the biggest point is, we've talked a lot about mentors in our podcast historically. But one of the other things that has always come full circle for us has been networking. And people really get nervous to network. And I guess I'm trying to think if I did ever. No, I was kind of outgoing. So, it was never really a big deal to talk to a random person. But people get stressed out about that. And I think, and I don't understand it. Could be personality types, could be introvert, extrovert, could be your disc profile, could be all kinds of things could come into the psychology of it. But the interview shouldn't garner excessive pressure that we put on it. right? It's a conversation. It's a human conversation. You're looking for a connection. You're looking for to tell someone why you want to go there. And, we've proven time and time again that preparation is everything.
Yeah.
So if you are going to have an interview, write down 20 things that you're passionate about. Write down 10 questions that you have done. And they don't have to be complex questions. Like, what's the best food on campus? Like, that's a great icebreaker conversation starter,
Oh, I was always so impressed when a student would come with a list of questions. Mm-hmm. Not the parent. Parents always had a list of questions. Yeah. But the student led the conversation with a list of questions. And I would literally write that student's name down. I'd be like, I need to remember this person. Mm-hmm. And when they come across my desk with an application, maybe they would, maybe they won't, I'll remember this person. And there's just something intangible about self-advocating, but also showing that you're interested, giving me that respect.
Showing that you took the time to learn enough to have a question. Right. That's what you're, when you ask a question, it's because you don't understand something. To not understand something, you have to have dug in a little bit into that something to be able to have an intelligent question about it. So take the time to do that, because as you said, they write the name down. It is 100% true. And people go, oh, I'm not good in conversations, right? You don't have to be highly conversational, right?
No.
But you can take a deep breath and you can talk to this person who's going to help. And again, your point, I think, is so well received today, is they're there to try and figure out how to get you in, not how to keep you out.
Yes.
Right. So go in with that mentality, and it should shift the influence in that conversation.
Absolutely.
Any last advice thing that we didn't get to that you wanted to say on this podcast?
I think it's such a privilege to be involved with students at this stage in life, and to be able to help them, or maybe model the first adult decision that they will be making.
Yeah.
There are lots of decisions that they'll make in high school, but the college choice is the first adult decision, I feel like.
I agree.
And so how are we modeling that? And if we model it with fear and with misinformation and with, just all of this fluff, what are we saying to those students, and how are we helping them make decisions in the future?
Yeah. And the whole genesis behind this podcast was to peel back the veil and say, hey, here it is. Here's the information. This is it's not Dave Kozak saying it. It's not Elizabeth West saying it. It's Elizabeth West, Dave Kozak, every admissions counselor we've interviewed, everybody, like, this is what the world is saying about it. So stop the assumptions, stop the headline reading, and really dig into this, right? The way I've always looked at it is, you have one opportunity to make the right choice.
Yes.
You may be able to shift and rebound, but the right choice from the get-go, you have one opportunity to do it. And man, isn't that a great responsibility for me to help guide someone? And isn't that a great responsibility for someone who doesn't have the tools to do so? So that responsibility needs to be thought about. And I always get quasi annoyed when parents think they know it all.
Oh.
And I'm going, hey, when did you go to college, buddy? What was that, 30 years ago? Like, the game has changed significantly, and the way it works is different, and the price tag is different, and the commitment is different. So, we always tell people, keep your finger on the pulse during the years leading up to college and through college, because it's important to understand all this.
Absolutely. And I have to add that thank you for having all of these resources for students and families, and all the work that you do. I mean, you can tell you're passionate. You are keeping your finger on the pulse. And wow, I'm just honored to have you as a professional, fellow professional.
Well, thank you very much for that. And I agree completely. And I would say, it's the work that we're doing that is trying to battle the masses. And so thank you for what you do for families. And I think, love to have you back and talk about more specific subject matters as we go forward. And, share the podcast, let people hear it. I do interviews just like this. I let the person tell me what they know, and you can decipher the information for yourself. And there's a lot of good ones from a lot of different leaders in higher ed, from the provosts to the directors to deans to people that do it for a living. So thank you for the kind words.
Thank you so much for having me here, and I would be delighted to come back.
Fantastic. Thank you, Elizabeth. Thanks, everybody. This has been College Knowledge.
Thanks, everyone, for being a part of College Knowledge, powered by Elite Collegiate Planning. Just as an FYI, we are guaranteeing that you will save money on college by working with ECP. This is a guarantee that you will pay less. Book a free consultation at elitecollegiateplanning.com. Thanks for listening to the College Knowledge Podcast with your hosts, Dave Kozak and Joe Kerins. We hope you enjoyed this week's exploration of higher education, sponsored by the College Planning Network and Paradigm Financial Group. That's all for this episode. See you next time.